Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review. In this video I'm going to review Infinite Granite by Deafheaven. This is a brand new full-length album from Deafheaven, and this one in particular is a bit of a special case for the band because it is a bit of a departure compared to what we were previously used to with Deafheaven material. Now obviously it's not that much of a surprising change of direction, it's not something that much out of your element if you're familiar with Deafheaven so far. However, it's possibly an album that you wouldn't really imagine that would be from the same band considering some of their previous releases if it wasn't mentioned at you beforehand. It's not that surprising, but it's certainly somewhat unexpected. And this is because Deafheaven actually ended up making a full-on shoegaze album. For those who are not somehow familiar with it already, Deafheaven were known to be one of the most significant, if not the most significant, black gaze band out there. So obviously this is not that much of a severe change of direction, but it still feels different compared to basically anything else they've done. There is just the final minutes of the final track Mombasa, which is where we get some black gaze elements, but at this point it's just too little too late, and there are very few occasions as well with some tracks ending with scream vocals like Great Mass of Color and Villain, but this by itself doesn't really say much. This is not enough in order to consider this a black gaze album. Outside of those very few occasions, this album is undoubtedly completely shoegaze. This by itself is obviously not a big deal for me. I'm always looking forward to bands experimenting with new sounds and trying something new and going into different directions. So the main question is whether this album right here, Infinite Granite, works as a shoegaze album. The answer is unfortunately what we get is a pretty bland and basic shoegaze album, and apart from that there is not really that much to it. And so here's where the issue comes. Taking it as a shoegaze album is not bad, it's just a pretty decent, somewhat average album on what it does. Apart from that though, there is not really something that unique or something really that innovative about it. And this is what hurts this album, is that it comes from a band like Deafheaven. If it was from just another random band making another like basic shoegaze album, it wouldn't be that much of a big deal. However, we're talking about Deafheaven right here, one of the pioneer groups on black gaze. Sunbather is possibly considered the most significant album in this entire genre. Although I enjoy Sunbather, I have a soft spot for Ordinary Corrupt Human Love. This album for me ended up fusing so many different elements and sounds together, and it just sounded so intriguing and made a really interesting mix of sounds. So for me, I would argue that this is possibly the most unique album Deafheaven have ever done. Even if it's not considered their most critically acclaimed one, it was an album that was forward-thinking and tried something different. And then we get Infinite Granite, which the only way this album is unique is that it's unique for the band. It's a new direction for the band, because apart from that there's not really something significant or innovative or unique about it. For the casual shoegaze listener, this would be a pretty enjoyable album. However, when we talk about Deafheaven, there is obviously a set of standards to be met, and this album, in my opinion, didn't really reach or meet those types of standards. You could argue that this is somewhat the same case with the shoegaze album that was released from Alsey, which was also one of the pioneers when it comes to black gaze. There was obviously this portion of people that were pissed with the change of direction. However, I think that the biggest issue with this album in particular was that it didn't feel as innovative compared to what the band previously did. And I would say that this is possibly going to be the same case with Infinite Granite. I feel that as the years pass by, this will not be one of the albums from Deafheaven that is going to be remembered in their catalog. But other than that, like I said, it's a pretty okay shoegaze album, but it doesn't really leave me that much room to have many things to talk about, because I don't really feel there's nothing that special to be noted here. The production, it's just okay. I didn't even really like the production that much. I thought that it was just pretty basic and standard for the most part. The performances, I would say they sound kinda okay. The vocals were at best average, And overall, I would say one of the biggest issues is that the album becomes quickly somewhat forgettable, a bit one-dimensional, and I would say that what hurts the album the most is how quickly predictable it becomes. The pacing and the structure of the songs, they have nothing to really write home about. Also, I think that this album feels somewhat long. I don't think there's really the need for all of the tracks basically to be like 5 or 6 minutes long. There is not really that much happening to those songs in order to justify these track lengths. Now the album for me actually starts in a somewhat engaging way. I enjoyed the track Cellstar. I think that it contains some nice riffs and melodies to it, and it's somewhat atmospheric. It sets the tone for a shoegaze album. And then there's also the track in Blair, which I would say that it's possibly one of my favorite moments in the album, even if I think that the vocals in this particular track were somewhat lacking. I like the melodies out of this track. The mixing was a bit poor, but when I first listened to this song, I was actually somewhat excited to see the directions out of this new album. Then there is also the track Great Mass of Color, which for me it's definitely my favorite moment out of this project. I like the chorus out of this track. I think it has some pretty nice engaging elements, and there is also the first time where you actually get a more of an explosive ending with screaming vocals. This is the first instance where we get a bit of a taste of Black Gaze, but the issue, like I said, is that after this point this basically happens another 2 or 3 times, making this whole thing sound painfully predictable, because after a certain point I knew what to expect. The structures in many parts feel extremely similar. Most of the tracks end up finishing in a bang, in the sense that they just end up having the most intense and the most distorted guitars towards the final minute of the song, which is nice to see it happen once or twice. It makes sense and it makes for some nice conclusions. However, it happens way too many times here, and it just gets pretty stale and boring. The only track that I ended up feeling the least engaged with was the track Villain, because this track in its majority has no punch to it. It's just this really slow paced and drawn out track that only picks up towards the end, and that's pretty much about it. Other than that, there is not really that much to it. The track I ended up feeling the most underwhelmed with was the track Neptune Raining Diamonds, which is basically an interlude which has those ambient synths to it, and it just feels really out of place, and the synths don't even sound good. The melodies are not memorable, they feel random, and it's a synth that doesn't really sound good. This for me was just dead weight, a track that wasn't really necessary, and it didn't really offer that much to the experience. Actually, it ended up serving as the most underwhelming moment out of the whole project in my opinion. Thankfully, it's the shortest moment over here, going for just 3 minutes. When it comes to the second half of the album, I think that it just becomes less and less engaging, offering more of the same, and tracks like The Gnashing and Other Language didn't really offer that much. I think that they're pretty okay shoegaze tracks, but that's all there is to it. That's all there is with this whole project. There are a few moments that I liked, but overall this certainly doesn't feel like an album that I'm going to ever come back to. Being a shoegaze album, Infinite Granite is pretty serviceable, even if it goes more to the average side of things. As a Deafheaven album, from a band that is mostly well known for its constant innovation, this ends up making it the least engaging and the most forgettable album they've put in their catalog. Even less engaging than their very first album, which never ended up becoming that much of a huge deal. So this album, in my opinion, only serves as unique in the Deafheaven catalog, but not really ended up with that much of a positive outcome. I'm going to give Infinite Granite a 6- out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.